412 gold florins. That is the exact price of your family's ruin. You are sitting in the freezing back room of a wool shop that no longer belongs to you. The hearth is dead. The ledger on the heavy oak table is open. You stare at the black ink. You have stared at it for 3 hours. The math does not change. Your father died coughing in a damp bed, leaving you a warehouse of ruined English wool and a promissory note held by men who do not forgive. They arrive tomorrow at noon. They will take the shop. They will take the ancestral house. They will leave you to the muddy streets of Florence. You have 14 silver grossi in a leather pouch. It is not even enough to buy a proper grave. The city outside is silent. The distant bells of the Duomo strike 2 in the morning. Everyone in this city worships God, but they obey the florin. You learned this watching your father beg for extensions. You watched the way the banking families looked at him, like a dying animal, like meat. He played their game. He traded physical things, wool, spices, grain. He relied on ships, wagons, unpredictable storms, and rotting cargo. It is slow. It is entirely vulnerable. Debt is not vulnerable. Debt is invisible. Debt never sleeps, never rots, and never sinks in the Mediterranean. You trace the names in the ledger. You look at the heavy wax seal on the promissory note. A dark red stain on thick parchment. A thought forms in the cold room. A dangerous, quiet thought. You cannot pay the 400 florins. That is a fact. But as you drag your finger across the fine print of the merchant's contract, you notice the date. You notice the routing of the payment through Venice. You notice a slight, almost imperceptible discrepancy in the exchange rate between the Venetian ducat and the Florentine florin, a blind spot in the church's usury laws. First rule: a desperate man hides, a dead man attacks. You are not going to beg for time tomorrow. You are going to walk into their palatial estate with empty pockets. You are going to offer them a new contract. But what can a man with nothing offer the richest men in Florence? Noon. The Strozzi Palazzo smells of beeswax and roasted pork. You smell of damp wool and cold sweat. 3 men sit across a massive marble table. They do not look at your face. They look at your empty hands. You do not apologize for the 412 florins. Apologies are for men who plan to pay. Instead, you slide a single piece of parchment across the cold stone. You explain the Venetian route. You explain the fractional yield hidden in the silver exchange rate between the ducat and the florin, a shadow in the church's usury laws, perfectly legal, completely invisible. Second rule: rich men do not want their money back. They want their money to multiply. Silence stretches, a heavy, suffocating silence. The eldest man taps a heavy gold ring against the table. Tap, tap. Every strike sounds like a nail in your coffin. If they laugh, you are finished. If they call the guards, the shop is gone. The man stops tapping. He pulls the parchment closer. He studies the numbers. He does not smile, but the air in the room shifts. They do not forgive your debt. They freeze it. They give you 90 days, not to pay them back, but to prove the mechanism works using their capital. If it succeeds, they take 90% of the profit. If it fails, they take your shop, your ancestral home, and your freedom. You walk out into the blinding Tuscan sun. Your chest is tight. You did not win. You merely traded a swift execution for a slow, grinding servitude. You are no longer a wool merchant. You are a conduit for someone else's greed. You have 90 days to turn ink into gold. And as you walk back through the crowded market, a cold dread settles in your stomach. You have the contract, but you have absolutely no idea how to actually execute the trade. The Strozzi gold sits in an iron strongbox under your bed. It weighs 40 pounds. It feels like a gravestone. To execute the trade, the gold must leave Florence. You cannot do it yourself. If you ride out of the city gates, the Strozzi will assume you are fleeing. They will send mercenaries before you reach Bologna. You need a broker in Venice. You spend 3 days standing in the muddy perimeter of the Mercato Vecchio. You observe the foreign merchants. You do not look for the sharpest man. Sharp men ask questions. You look for a greedy, unimaginative one. You find a Venetian spice trader desperate for Florentine liquidity. You draft the letter of exchange. The terms are dense, deliberately nested to obscure the silver arbitrage. He signs it without reading the 4th clause. You hand the Strozzi gold to an armed courier. Third rule: control is an illusion the moment capital moves. You watch the rider disappear through the city gates. The gold is gone. Your entire existence is now tied to a horse you do not own, traveling through mountain passes heavily patrolled by bandits. If it rains, the roads wash out. If he is robbed, you hang. You return to your freezing empty shop. You wait. 4 weeks pass. The 90-day window shrinks. You barely eat. You track the passing days by scratching chalk lines into the heavy oak table. Day 32. The sun sets. The church bells ring for evening prayer. A heavy, sudden knock at the door. You open it. It is not the courier. It is a man wearing the dark velvet cloak of a city magistrate. He is holding your letter of exchange. The wax seal has been broken. You brace yourself for the dungeon. The penalty for usury in Florence is public ruin and exile. The magistrate steps into the dim light of your shop. He does not signal for the city guards. Instead, he drops a heavy, travel-stained leather pouch onto the oak table. It lands with the dull, unmistakable thud of solid silver. He tosses the open letter of exchange beside it. "A fascinating document," he whispers. You say nothing. Silence is the only shield you have left. But he is not here to arrest you. He explains that your courier was detained at the city gates for a routine inspection. The magistrate read the contract. He expected an illegal loan. Instead, he found a masterclass in foreign exchange, a purchase of Venetian silver, settled at a future date, absorbing the profit in the currency spread. By the strict letter of the law, it is not a loan, it is a trade, perfectly legal, entirely invisible to the Pope's inquisitors. The magistrate looks at you, not with contempt, but with hunger. The Strozzi will get their 90%, but the magistrate has his own problem. He manages the treasury of the Silk Guild. Thousands of florins are rotting in a vault, doing nothing, because the fear of God keeps the guild from lending it out. He wants you to move it, quietly. Fourth rule: true power is born the moment the men who can destroy you realize they need you to make them rich. Over the next 2 winters, you cease to be a man. You become a mechanism. The Strozzi give you more capital. The magistrate feeds you guild money. The ledgers in your freezing back room multiply. You now control hundreds of thousands of florins. But the operation is entirely bottlenecked by the Venetian route. Then, on a Tuesday morning, a courier arrives bearing a seal you have never seen. It is from Rome. The seal is heavy red wax, the crossed keys of St. Peter. Your hands do not shake when you break it. You have forgotten how to feel fear. You only feel velocity. It is not a summons to the Inquisition. It is a request from the apostolic camera, the Pope's treasury. Rome collects tithes from every parish in England and France. But moving physical gold across the Alps is a logistical nightmare. Mercenaries take a tenth. French kings seize the heavily guarded wagons. The Vatican has heard whispers of the Florentine who moves wealth without moving metal. They want to transfer 80,000 ducats from Lyon to Rome before the first snow blocks the mountain passes. You do not have 80,000 ducats, but you understand the system now. Fifth rule: at the highest level, you stop trading money. You trade geography. You do not send armored wagons. You send a letter. You dispatch your quietest cousin to Lyon with a blank ledger and an iron stamp. A French bishop deposits the tithe in your cousin's office in Lyon. Your cousin issues a coded bill of exchange. The bishop travels to Rome, hands you the paper, and you pay him using the local reserves of the Silk Guild. The physical gold stays in France to buy English wool. The wool is sold in Venice. The Venetian silver settles the Silk Guild in Florence. A perfect invisible circle. You just built a private financial highway for the church. For the first time, you lease an entire palazzo. You hire 30 clerks. They sit in rows, writing in absolute silence. You control the monetary arteries of Europe. But Florence is a small, jealous city. And on a freezing November morning, a black carriage stops outside your palazzo. It bears the crest of the Medici. The man who steps out of the black carriage does not wear armor. He wears simple, unadorned purple wool. He is a Medici, the shadow ruler of the Republic. He walks into your silent banking hall. Your 30 clerks stop writing. The air turns to ice. You stand. He does not threaten you. He does not demand to see your books. He simply sits across from you and stares at the flame of a single candle on your desk. The Medici Bank is bleeding. A massive secret loan to the King of England has defaulted. If the Florentine guilds find out, there will be a violent run on their vaults. The city will tear itself apart by nightfall. He needs 200,000 florins by tomorrow morning, and he needs it to look like it never happened. Sixth rule: when the gods of the city bleed, they do not pray. They come to the shadows. You do not ask for interest. Interest is for desperate merchants. You ask for leverage. You provide the liquidity through a complex web of blind trusts in Geneva. In exchange, your brother becomes a senior magistrate. Your cousin takes over the tax farming of the entire merchant quarter. The Medici retain their crown, but you now own the wood it rests on. Years bleed into one another. The city transforms. You never run for public office. You never wear silk in the streets. You still eat simple bread and hard cheese. But nothing moves in Florence without your silent nod. You fund the marble for the new cathedrals. You dictate which noble families eat and which starve simply by adjusting a fraction of a percentage in a ledger in Lion. You are no longer a banker. You are the infrastructure. But a machine this large requires constant feeding. Late one winter night, your chief clerk hands you a sealed missive. The wax is black. The English king has not just defaulted on the Medici. He is declaring war on France, and he expects you to finance his armies. The English king does not ask. Kings never do. They demand. You finance the war. You do not send soldiers. You send ink. 50,000 florins a month. A river of invisible capital bleeding across Europe. You fund the mercenaries. You fund the steel. You fund the slaughter. Years pass. The king wins. The king loses. It does not matter. The outcome of the war is irrelevant. The debt remains. It compounds. It grows like a living thing in the dark. It is winter again. You are an old man now. You sit in the grand hall of your palazzo. The hearth is massive, roaring with a fire that consumes an entire forest of wood. Yet you still feel a chill in your bones. Your chief clerk opens the heavy oak doors. He brings a man inside, a minor wool merchant from the outer districts. His shipments were seized by the king's tax collectors to pay the interest on your loans. He is entirely ruined. The merchant stands before your massive marble table. He is shivering. He does not look at your face. He looks at his empty hands. He owes your bank exactly 412 gold florins. He begs for an extension. He speaks of his dead father. He speaks of his freezing shop, of his family's impending starvation. You stare at the open ledger. You stare at the black ink. Seventh rule: the machine does not stop. It only changes operators. You look at this desperate, broken man. You do not feel pity. You do not feel mercy. You feel absolutely nothing. You raise your hand. You rest it on the cold stone. You tap your heavy gold ring against the marble table. Tap. Tap. You tell him he has 90 days.